You're obviously here for what the title says, so let's jump right in. Number one, most cameras today that are manufactured within the past few years have what's known as InBody Stabilization, unless you're Canon. Basically it just stabilizes your footage a little bit for you, and it's built into the body of your camera. And if this is a feature that you have in your camera, I'm sure that you've thought to yourself, well, if I turn the stabilization on in camera and then I put it on a gimbal, the stabilization of the gimbal and the stabilization of the camera will probably work together, and it'll make all of my shots even smoother than if I just use the gimbal alone. So this is true up until a certain point. From my findings, what I've found through my experience, ultra wide, so 10 to 15, something like that, all the way up to like 35 millimeters, is fine, and the stabilization in the camera doesn't really affect anything. But once you get up to like 50 millimeters, what I've noticed is you start getting these weird micro jitters where your camera actually kind of looks like it's getting bumped, and it looks like it's almost going back a frame. It just jitters a little bit. I shot this on my 85 mil, and you can kind of just see it has that weird tweak thing. It's really subtle, but it's noticeable. It just tweaks a little bit. So if you're shooting over 50 millimeters, I'd recommend just turning your camera's in-body stabilization completely off if you're on a gimbal. It's gonna be smooth anyways, so you don't technically even need it. So I usually like to keep a microphone on top of my camera, and this is just because when I shoot weddings or I shoot events, I like to have some of that ambient sound in the background to put, you know, behind the music that's playing or anything like that. And honestly, just to have a high quality audio track is useful in general. But if you're flying on a gimbal, you might want to consider taking that microphone, or really anything that's sitting on top of your camera, off. You know, most people don't realize this because they're going quick and they get their camera all set up, but they don't think about the fact that they might want to go into the low mode on their gimbal. And what that is, you just flip the handle around, and now you have an easier time getting closer to the ground and getting super low angles. Well, if you have a microphone on top of your camera, it's gonna prevent the handle from going above the camera. So the handle has to flip all the way around and go above the camera. If you have a microphone or a monitor or anything like that on your camera, on top of your camera, it's gonna prevent that handle from going up. And so it's just easier to take it off and not have to worry about it, because then you'll be stuck shooting your low angle shots like this. Now, this last tip is actually my favorite tip out of all of them. And ever since I figured this one out, my gimbal work has been so much better. So when I first started using electronic gimbals, one of my favorite shots that I wanted to get was those parallax shots, one where you're rotating around somebody but panning the opposite way, the ones that look like this. So naturally, I took my camera, I balanced it on the gimbal, I went out and I started shooting, and everything looked good on my LCD screen, but when I got back to the computer, it kind of looked like this. The problem was I naively assumed that to get the parallax effect, you would use the handle on the gimbal to rotate in the opposite direction that you were walking, so that would give you the rotation. Now, in theory, that makes sense, but it just didn't work for me. It wasn't working, it didn't look good. And so I eventually just gave up. I didn't want to try it anymore because it just looked like crap, and I didn't know how to do it. But recently, I figured out a way to fix this. Now, I can't believe that I didn't realize this at first. It's kind of stupid that I didn't even think about it, but if you look down at the handle of pretty much any gimbal on the market, you'll see a joystick, and this is this is what's gonna make the parallax effect way easier. So when you rotate with the handle on the gimbal, you're relying on your hands to do the motion, and your hands are rarely ever perfectly steady and perfectly consistent. So you'll jump and then you'll go a little bit slower and then you'll go a little bit faster by accident. You don't even realize it. And while you're shooting, it looks okay on your LCD screen, but you're not even thinking about the fact that it probably doesn't look that good. When you're using the joystick, it's all algorithmic, and the joystick is gonna go as fast as you tell it to, and it'll continue to go that fast no matter what. So you press down on the joystick to the left or to the right and you walk in the opposite direction, and it's perfectly smooth and it looks buttery, and I love it. I love my shots now. I love how they look. I'm loving how they're coming out, and I'm really happy that I figured this out. So I recommend getting the Zhiyun, get the app that your gimbal is supposed to work with. Mine is the Zhiyun Crane 2. I use that and I love it. But get the Zhiyun app or get the Moza Air app, whatever your gimbal is, get the app for that so that you can tweak the settings. Here are my settings for the Zhiyun Crane 2. And this is basically just gonna give you the flexibility to choose how fast or slow that joystick is moving for you. So if you wanna get really nice, slow, establishing shots, then you probably wanna make the joystick panning a little bit slower so that you can get a nice, smooth shot. But if you're, walking around moving with people and moving really fast, one, you could either use the handle because then it's not as noticeable, or you can speed that joystick movement up. So those are my tips for you. I hope they helped you. These are some of the things that I wish I knew going into buying a gimbal and using a gimbal. It would have saved me a lot of the hassle that I ended up going through. But yeah, if you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, leave a comment down below and tell me why. I'm always open to criticism and I always want to learn and grow from what people have to say. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And by the way, I upload a new video every other Sunday, or at least I try to. But that's going to do it for this one. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.